Hello, hello, hello. Good morning and welcome to Feedback Friday. I'm your host, Jacob Johnson. We're doing art today, and I need to just fiddle with some links right real quick. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Alright. Just wanted to give the link to one of my coworkers because they're interested in checking out Feedback Friday because they're new to the team and curious what it's all about. Alright. So, sorry if it's like bad audio today. I have our big AC unit running off in the corner, so it's a bit loud. I actually got the lapel mic like a little while back, and I tried to set it up this morning. Wasn't doing anything good. I couldn't get it to make any noise, so unfortunately I do not have that yet. But I'll try and get that set up for next show if I remember to do that, because I'm probably going to be running the AC quite a bit. It's getting pretty toasty, and it would probably be nicer audio quality, except for when I'm kind of drinking my coffee and such, then you can hear the nice kind of like gulping. So enjoy that when we get there. Hello, hello. Audio is fine? Okay, that's great to hear. No new people on the art team. It's a kind of PR kind of person. So they want to see what Feedback Friday is about. So yeah, see how today goes. So the other day, actually it was yesterday, I started on a character. I got pretty far on it. So we'll actually be like right in the middle of rendering when we start. So maybe bring my window over. So, just see my living room like the horror it is. So yeah, we started a cute little character. I'll just bring it up on screen in a second. Sorry, I should have organized my windows already, but had a little bit of a later start today. Not that I'm ever actually good at being kind of on task and on time. So this right here is the character that I did a sketch for it on Wednesday and did a bunch of rendering on it yesterday. But I didn't even mean to render this far because I wanted to kind of save this character for the stream. However, I just kind of got carried away trying to get some cute coloring on it. So much cat hair. And so, yeah, what I want to do with this is kind of really work out the lighting and the kind of atmosphere, because basically I just kind of blocked in the coloring without much rendering. There's a gradient on it, but I think it can go a lot further and look a lot nicer. And then I started a sketch for a new character, trying to get ahead, because I've actually fallen a bit behind in my task list, so I'm trying to like creep into next week's tasks because it's going to be a shorter week anyway, as we have Canada Day on Monday. So we might finish this up, maybe even wrap it up by lunch. We'll see. But I do want to maybe work on the sketch that I have. I'm not really liking where it is yet, so we'll see. But yeah, we'll see if we can kind of like get through this character and then work on a new character together. All right, let me see what's in the chat. Also, let me sound my horn. I'm glad you guys can't hear the AC unit because it is loud for me, but I presume that this kind of streaming setup just kind of tunes out the white noise. Oh, ooh. Thank you, Michelle. Okay. Michelle sent a Larry link for me to give out, but we'll have to wait. Have to wait. I'll give that out when I go on lunch. So, all right. Let's see. Yeah, so the idea behind this character is in the kind of Gauntlet Rift, there is kind of like a slew of dangerous and difficult mice to catch, and they just kind of like get increasingly difficult. And to kind of balance some things out, we needed to kind of create a generic, very easy mouse. So even as things scale in difficulty, for the other characters, this character remains very easy. So I kind of decided to go all in with the super adorable, kind of hopelessly, weak mouse. But yeah, so I kind of want him to look like distracted by kind of something above him. He like dropped his sword. His gear is kind of really low tier compared to the other characters in the area. So should be a fun one to render too. I kind of wanted to go a little bit further with the kind of fur coloring and such. I often do just kind of like monotone kind of fur colors, which works. The characters look pretty cool. But I figured, what, let's kind of like add a little bit more range to the character, make it a little more interesting because it's very simple. So I think we want to try and really kind of push it. Although that said, I have kind of limited time to work on it. I do need to kind of like get ahead of tasks because I had fallen behind, so I don't want to spend too much time rendering. But yeah, we want to have some fun with it at least, and so that's what we're going to do now. We're actually getting pretty close to having the full set, the full cast of characters we have outlined for the initial kind of like build of this. We might need to add more kind of characters depending on what we discover through more testing of the game. But we're doing pretty good. We have probably 20 mice created so far, maybe around that. So it's pretty exciting. We're getting close. I apologize for making you go and destroy such adorable creations. Will there be more than 8 floors? No. Right now, it's kind of like the 7 major floors, and then the 8th is kind of the boss floor. That is still technically possible to change. We were kind of like talking about the idea of having essentially like an endless kind of climb, or like the floors kind of more floors get added, stuff like that. But that's very much kind of like spitballing, and I think that's probably not what we're going to do. But you know what, that I won't say 100% we have exactly 8 floors, but we have 8 floors right now, and I don't see that kind of changing. 11 years in running, I know, it's crazy. I'm actually wearing the 7th birthday shirt, one that Alex made. Alright. So, what I'm thinking for this is the character's looking up at kind of like a warm kind of light source. So the shadows are going to be pretty cool, the ambience all around is going to be kind of in the cooler range. The cobblestones kind of, like the whole atmosphere is a little kind of purpley with the nebula. I mean, it's basically the same backdrop that all the other characters have had, but we're kind of looking down, zoomed in a bit, to kind of get a more kind of cutesy perspective on this character. I think this is probably like the cutest Rift mouse we've ever made. Usually they're all like powerful, terrifying monsters, behemoths. So, where to start with this? So the eyes are kind of the furthest along, I would say. There's definitely stuff that I would tweak on it. I want to get more of the cobblestone reflecting into them, but that's kind of like final level detail stuff. Oh yeah, the rift gold leaf. I haven't done any rendering on the buckles, the leather, the cloak. The fur is probably what I'm going to spend a lot of the effort on, as well as the sword and the shield. And I'll need to definitely do some work on the actual backdrop. It's just kind of really, really loosely scribbled in. Yeah, so let's just kind of like look at what that kind of warm light could do. So, as many of you are probably familiar with, this sphere is just kind of like a tool that I use to kind of test the lighting and try and kind of like figure it out for myself. So if anyone kind of hasn't really seen me do that, basically I just kind of create a circle, and then I kind of paint it as if it's in just kind of like in the dark. There's just a little bit of the kind of the ambient light from the atmosphere, from the room it's in, from kind of whatever the environment is. So let's say if it was out in a desert, you'd have like the sand and the sky kind of just adding a little bit of soft light and color to that object. So for example, with this, I kind of already did a little bit of the warm lighting, but I think I want to push that further. But essentially, I just kind of create an object, and sometimes I'll make it a specific material to kind of like help me figure out, okay, so if I make this sphere the mouse fur, it'll help me figure out where kind of what colors would be in the shading on it. Or if I wanted to do like the leather or metal. I often do it for metal because you get a lot of reflections and stuff that can be pretty complicated otherwise. But right now I just kind of have it as almost just like generic neutral kind of object with lighting. So each of the different materials I can kind of like use this as a bit of a reference. So I'm going to just create a new layer that's kind of clipped into it. That way I can just paint within the boundaries. I'm just going to use my gentle brush. And we're going to go in with this kind of like warmer, I guess we could make it more like a point light. So essentially, right now there's a lot of soft lights on this character. They're all very kind of, they just kind of like have very soft edges, almost like a big cloud in the sky, kind of like lighting up a scene. It's not going to create hard shadows. They will be very soft and gentle shadows. But if we did something that created like, that's pretty extreme, but if we did something that created a strong shadow, that would be a lot more dramatic. And honestly, I don't actually think that I want that for this character because they're very cute, and I think a harsh light like that would actually change the tone of what we're seeing. So let me just quickly throw that onto the character. I have a lot of layers on this. Let's see, where's the face? Okay, so here's the face. If I were to, I guess I'll just put this to screen, kind of toss this on top of the character, and just hit kind of the top sides of stuff and have it fall off very quickly. I'll just block it in really hard there. Really harsh. Doesn't look good. Okay, I'm just going to soften that a bit. So if I have kind of like very strong shadows, it's telling me that, you know, there's a very potent light source above the character. And that would kind of like draw a lot of the focus and attention, which, you know, maybe we want that. Oops. But at the same time, it also makes it a more kind of like intense and dramatic image. And I think if we want this character to remain super cute, we probably want to, yeah, and since it's so strong, it would actually have like cast shadows from his big juicy eyes. Yeah, since it's such a cute character, I don't think we want to have like a lot of intensity. And I might drop this all down. So it's like that kind of works, but it's almost too much, you know. Not at all cute. Don't like the dark eyes. I definitely think we'll lighten it up. Again, like what I'm showing with this kind of like this version of it was like an under-rendered. Yeah, we'll probably do like lit up eyes, like essentially a little more of the kind of color can be, probably have it be quite saturated, make it a bit warmer. Yeah, for the eyes, I could imagine we would add a lot more color to it, a lot more reflections, make them nice and juicy. And I don't know, maybe you mean the kind of like glowing eyes that we've done for some characters, but I think that would be a bit much. Kind of lose the cuteness if we go for that kind of glow. That just makes it kind of a zombie. Actually, I'll just leave that. And we'll add in kind of our reflections later on. And by later on, I mean right now, because that's just what I'm doing. Yeah, we'll refine all that. Yeah, so I don't think that we want a harsh key light. So I'll keep this probably color for the light, but I'm gonna really kind of soften it down a lot and have it like really just kind of like fall off quickly, almost like a candlelight. So there's a lot of different kind of things that's happening with light. It's a very complicated subject, but light can fall off very quickly depending on kind of what kind of style and how it's emitted. Like fire, candlelight, that kind of stuff falls off so fast. It's actually like there's a formula for it, which is like the intensity falls off, inverse squared kind of thing. It's kind of actually cool. I don't know if this will make sense the way that I explain it, but if you have, I think I might as well just attempt to explain. Why not? You have your light source. The rays are all kind of shooting out from it, right? And if you had a box here, and it had the rays passing through it, if basically the same distance away you drew a series of those boxes, you would have kind of like a third of that light essentially going through, and then out here it's like a third of that third kind of thing. That's pretty extreme there. I think it would be further out here, but essentially like it just kind of scatters away very quickly. I don't know if that made sense to anybody, but that is something to kind of like be aware of if you're kind of painting scenes with particular light. You need to understand that in some cases it falls off super fast. So I think what this character is looking at is one of those light sources where it just kind of like, it would have a gradient to it almost. So on the top of the face, it'll be pretty intense, but still soft, because I don't want really harsh lighting. And any of the surfaces that are facing directly to it will get the most light. But then everything is kind of like aimed away and further away, so it's going to fall off super fast. So like the lip has a portion where it's kind of like aimed right at the light. The maybe like the tear duct here catches a good amount because it's kind of, eyes are wet and reflective, and the tear duct is what's kind of producing that wetness. So it'll also be pretty reflective. So maybe it'll just catch that light source there and just kind of reflect it directly. The top of the teeth here would probably get some of that right there. And then because teeth are actually kind of translucent, if this light source is strong enough, which maybe it's not, we'll actually get some of that light scattering through the tooth itself and kind of like bringing out the material color of the tooth and kind of adding some warmth to that. So actually maybe somewhere around here. Let's see, yeah. And I'll just kind of smooth that out just a bit because we really don't need it to be too much. Just a hint of it is fine. It just adds a little bit of kind of realism to it, hopefully. Alright. I'm sorry if I don't interact with the chat too much today. Kind of have, like, my hands full with this character. I know exactly where I'm going with it. We're not really kind of like coming up with anything too unique for this character, although next kind of character, the sketch that I just barely started, will probably get some good input from you guys on that, because I don't like where it is, and hopefully you guys will see it. Yeah, we'll see. All right. Let's see. Why is that going later? Oh, because it's a screen layer. That's why. Didn't mean to lighten that up. Okay. I think the nose will get the most light, actually, because it is moist. It's close enough to the light source. It's one of the closest things to it, in fact. can get some of that nice subsurface scattering as well on the nose. So I'm going to turn off the sketch. I feel like I don't need it, and it's just interfering with the colors a bit. So let's get really rich color. Screen layer again, of course. Alright, I'm just going to make a layer on top that I can modify without throwing myself off. Okay, and I don't want to get too detailed on the nose. When you're doing kind of cute characters, if you get overly detailed, it can start to look creepy. Like when you kind of like separate the teeth individually and kind of like have all that level of detail, it actually gets kind of weird looking and uncomfortable. So let's not do that. Thinking I might just kind of merge all these layers down. But maybe not yet. Alright, so I'm gonna just soften the edge of that. It seems okay. And then the very top of the fur, we'll just get a nice amount of this light kind of reflecting, because fur is actually, you know, a little bit reflective. It's kind of a hair, and then at that angle, getting kind of this effect called the Fresnel effect, where essentially things at a very, very steep angle are more reflective. So it's just now, mind you, that angle right there, where I've kind of painted that highlight, is suggesting the light source is more like right here. If you can see my cursor, right here, like actually behind and above the mouse, whereas I'm actually trying to make the character looking up at a light source that's kind of directly above them. So this reflection's a bit of a cheat, and so I might just soften that off a bit. Yeah, let's do that. If anything, this eyelid is more directly looking at it, so it's tapered in. I'm also doing things like trying to think of kind of what are the actual planes of the face? What is at what angle? So there would actually be kind of a dip in this spot, because you have kind of the eye socket and the forehead, which is pretty flat on ice. But there will be kind of this plane that kind of falls in, and it would kind of like become the crease for the eyelid here. But we don't need to kind of get dark with that crease. If we kind of like just let it exist as it is, it'll remain a bit cuter, I think. But we can lighten up the top lid. And then I think we'll add a bit more kind of flesh color to the eyelid there. And that's probably more than enough for that area. I have kind of like a harsh kind of edge here, I might extend this down a bit and just kind of soften that shadow a bit. It's currently a drop shadow from what I did before, but I think since we've kind of decided to soften that light source, then we can just kind of lose that drop shadow a bit. Doesn't need to be so harsh. I'm also potentially losing some of that rich color that I had before. So let's see. I'm just going to grab that orange, because I liked it being orange. Let's try and bring that color back in here. And same with over here. It just got a bit muddy and gray. Okay. I still want some of the light kind of catching on this cheek. So, whoops. All right. So yeah, I don't always get to kind of like work at this level of detail on the stream, because usually it's like we'll create a sketch and we'll try and fill that in really quick, and then we kind of, you know, we wrap up the stream before I kind of like get to the final render pass. So I figured for this character, since it's a kind of cute and simple character, it would be a pretty ideal candidate for doing a little more kind of deep rendering. The stuff that you guys don't always get to see. I used to do more of it because the characters were a lot simpler for the other streams, and I was able to actually kind of fit a whole character from sketch to final render in one kind of 7-hour stream. But it's kind of shifted away from that a little bit. We don't always get this far, so I figured it would actually be quite nice to be able to make something where I can post it on the wall and be like, look, it's actually a finished piece as opposed to a work in progress. So it's been a little while. Okay. So the face is all right. I'm happy with where that's at. This strand of hair is a little underappreciated. Let's see what we can do to it. That should probably work in this layer. Alright. Okay. Alright, I'm just going to merge. I'm getting too many weird layer interactions. That's a little simpler to paint with. And I'm happy with where it's at, so I don't expect I'll need to have tweaked those individual layers at all. Instead, I'll just paint what I want, where I want. So there. Okay. So that's working. Let's try kind of some other areas. Overall, it's a pretty low-key image. The like lighting is pretty dark right now. And I think what we want to do is consider the value of the piece. Right now I have the face pretty well lit, which means that it'll stand out against kind of like the darker elements of the piece, and produce a lot of contrast on the face, which is really ideal. you want to draw the eye to the face. The face is naturally drawn there anyways, but you want to make it look interesting, and the right level of contrast will do that. And if we have kind of like a low contrast background, that just kind of keeps the interest on the character, which is good. Those eyes are demon eyes. Are they just too glassy? Like, is it the shape? Are they too big? Actually, one of the original sketches I did for this, the eyes were like ridiculously huge. Yeah, I just wanted to have really kind of cutesy proportions, so big eyes. I tried for, and they're bugging out of the head. I don't know. Maybe they're just not sitting right. I haven't actually flipped this image in a while. I'm afraid to now. Let's see how weird it looks when I flip it. It's kind of got a twisted face. It's not as horrible as the original sketch. It's the color. The black dead eyes that are just reflecting blue eyes. I mean, admittedly, most of the characters, there you go, is that better? A lot of the characters do have just kind of like really dark eyes. Let's see. Actually might go for like a really warm, because this is actually kind of more it's even more demonic to me, having like the red. Okay. Let's try blue, because someone asked for blue. That just look like they have like that oil slick kind of finish on them because of the color grading. If we add like just kind of like a band of green. And yellow. Kind of like on the edge of that. Here we go. Now it's an oil slick. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Like most of the kind of mouse eyes that we do are actually kind of like a really, really, really dark, warm color. So I don't know why these ones feel a little more kind of demonic, as some have said. Maybe without that color, the red. Maybe it's just kind of the shine that isn't quite natural feeling. Let's try adding a little more shine to the edge, because this is where it would pick up a fair amount of the reflection on the edge of the eyes. It kind of adds a little bit of cuteness, perhaps. It almost looks like whites in the eyes. Yeah, it's pretty easy to get caught up on these kinds of details, and until other things are resolved, I don't really want to get too snagged on such things. So, I think I'll just knock that back a little. And then knock that back. I do still want that color in there, I think. because it's like the warm light is hitting the eye and kind of reflecting on the inside of it. So it would actually probably kind of get that warm glow behind it. Plus it'll help make this light source feel more real. So you know what, I'm just going to go with this. If it looks demonically possessed to you, all the more reason to go and catch them and not feel bad about it being so cute. Alright. So, moving on from the face, there's still more that we could do, of course, but, you know, I think it's wise to try and evenly render things. You don't want to get so caught up on one thing and render it, like, perfectly and then, you know, be burnt out or run out of time for the other stuff, or realize that, uh-oh, now that I've done the other stuff, I need to go back and change that thing that I've already rendered to perfection. It's just more efficient to kind of work evenly. So I'm just going to create a new layer for this metal armband that they have, the arm guard. And I just need to lighten it up. Overall, I think it's a little too dark. Which it doesn't read in the scene very well. So I'm going to first pick out those highlights, just because they're pretty useful for that. It's going to be reflecting this ear pretty heavily, and that ear currently is quite dark. Oops, didn't mean to move that. And then I'm going to reflect the ground. Speaking of animes, I'm watching Eva again. Now that's on Netflix. I think I've seen it like 3 times. I was like far too young to watch it. I watched it. And then I marathoned it like 2 other times. Probably the last time was like, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something. So it's been a while. Okay, so we have leather straps. I think I want to hit these buckles really quick. Just to get a little more light in the scene. Alright, so I think with this one it's a little difficult to get the light on it. I think it might just be on the edge. Probably even lower than that. So I'm going to create a new layer just so we can erase away. Alright. We'll just get a little bit of embossing or design work of some kind in here. Just add a little bit of interest, a little detail. That reflection might extend out a bit more. And the top of this buckle will be getting a decent amount of light. It's kind of out in the open, facing upwards. Cool. Alright, let's get some darks. So this is... I just kind of made the local color of it a bit warmer and richer in color. I'll actually make some of these highlights here. These will kind of, they'll go from this kind of orange, add more white, lose some saturation, and roll it towards yellow. To kind of like make it feel like it's getting hit with light. And I'll probably like add some interesting reflections into it to make it feel more metal, because it's a specular surface, right? It's not Lambertian. Alright, so we've got the darks in here too. And then so light starts here and it kind of like goes richer and darker and more saturated. And then as it gets dark, it kind of loses its color again, and I'm going to have it continue to roll away from yellow into kind of like this warm brown. And we'll just kind of get the shadows here. And then we'll probably do a reflection pass on this. Got a little too much light on there, I think. Don't have any of the midtones. Overall is quite dark. Okay, so let's do a kind of bounce layer. So this is going to take kind of like the light hitting that tummy, which I'll probably make a bit warmer, and then it's kind of bouncing onto this kind of gold, so it'll kind of just enhance those gold colors. But overall it's pretty muted. Let's dim that back a bit. Go. Nothing crazy reflected there. But the ground has lots of like purples, and so kind of maybe try going into almost like a pink for that reflection. Try that out. I think that looks okay. It's probably not the most natural color for that metal. And then the cloak behind is going to be like a very kind of rich red, I think. Okay. So looking at our specularity, or sorry, not our specularity, our values, what I think we'll do is we'll have the background here. Let's actually go to that layer, try some stuff with it. So the background, let's say, will get quite dark. Let's just do a luminosity layer. Oh, I didn't update the name of the stream. Sorry. Yeah, so that's probably all wrong. I usually don't do that. And then the foreground here, since there's lots of darks on the character, we'll lighten it up, and then that'll actually kind of be this warm light source glowing down on the character, so we can even lighten it like even more right where they're standing and have it fall off. And that'll have a really kind of nice, it's focusing on this character effect, you know, almost like it's being targeted by a charm spell or something like that. Okay, my computer's freezing up. Alright. Sometimes it's a bit risky to use the blending brush if it's too big. Okay, so we'll go... It's almost like there's a spotlight on the character, right? But it's not harsh. But because of the kind of the way that I'm balancing these values, we're going to get like nice, powerful contrast all across this character. But they have like a gradient that works with the scene. So I'm going to lighten up the tummy, tops of the knees, toes, add some kind of a little bit of color and brightness to the cloak, and that'll kind of really make this character punch out. So let's see. Just give it a save so I don't lose what I've done. Let me see, can I even update the name of the stream? Do I know how to do this? I should probably be logged into the proper account. Would it be useful? Okay. Now, where do I go? All this has changed. It used to be kind of like gaming.youtube, and it had kind of like a streaming system there. June 21st. Yeah, that's wrong. I'll just edit video. Does this work? Let's see. June 28th. Boop. And feedback Friday art with Jacob. And save. Hopefully I did that right. I basically never bother with it. Let me know if that fixed it. Oh, it's like a beta studio thing too. I don't even know how to navigate this. How do I get back to my live video? Okay, well, I don't need to really fiddle with that right now. I'm currently still streaming, and the name of the video should be updated, but it's not incredibly important. Okay, so I think the ears are a little too dark right now. The character is wearing kind of like a leather hat, and so that... Okay, there's the red cloak. Let's just add a little bit of light to that, just so that we have that reference. Be nice and saturated. Okay. And then we'll have some of the light being blocked by the head. I just wanted to get a little more form and color into the cloak so that I can see what's happening with it. Because otherwise it's just kind of, what is that weird kind of blob on his shoulders? And then we'll probably have it kind of go a bit kind of gray at the sides because the ground is bouncing up. It's kind of purpley blues, and just a hint of it, just so that the edges kind of read a little bit more. I think that's probably too far. That, so let's bring that back down a little bit. And for this kind of finishing rendering, it can get very finicky and very kind of like small details. So you might not even be able to see the things that I tweak all the time. But hopefully it's interesting to you guys. So just really subtly kind of gave it a little bit more dimension. And I think we'll kind of make that pop out more by having some occlusion shadow below it on the body. So let's actually throw that on there now. So let's use the occlusion brush, and we'll go cooler in the shadow here. Actually, no, occlusion shadows are normally pretty warm. So the new area is going to be about the King's Gauntlet, but it's the Rift version of the King's Gauntlet. So it's essentially kind of like climbing the tower and going after the boss at the top. But it's just got a lot more kind of fun and interesting gameplay to it compared to the original Gauntlet. The original Gauntlet was more kind of just a punishing, painful place to go. And I don't think we want to replicate that, per se. So hopefully you guys enjoy this kind of like new area that we're kind of working on. It's a little different from kind of some of the other stuff we've done, but we like to explore gameplay and see what people enjoy and what they don't. This one's kind of a little more almost video game feel to it, at least in my opinion. So we'll see what you guys think when it comes out. But it's actually the area itself is if you don't like it, you can blame me, because I kind of we were in-house being like, okay, well, we need to come up with our next content. What do we do? So a couple ideas were pitched out, and Rift Gauntlet was one of the kind of candidates, and so essentially I kind of sat down with Unity, and I'm learning how to kind of make prototypes in Unity in my own time. So I whipped up some gameplay for it, and people seemed to like it enough that they wanted to make it our next kind of like area. So hopefully it is an enjoyable experience for everybody. It's kind of diverted from the actual original kind of like prototype. So we'll see how much of it is my fault in the end, because it might end up being completely different from what I originally intended for it. But who knows? Okay, so right now I'm trying to kind of like create the light cast onto the top of the body here. and that is definitely too strong because I want there to be this fall off. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with a gentle eraser and almost kind of just erase away to kind of create a gradient without even really kind of like figuring out where the shadows are yet. So now I've kind of like almost gotten rid of the stuff at the bottom. The top of the belly has the most, but I think it could have a little bit more now. I think I erased a little too much. And that feels okay. What would happen if I make this a screen layer now? To kind of match what I did on the other one. Let's actually redo this with it as a screen layer so it's more closely tied to the other one. Alright, so knocking that back. Definitely don't need that much light on the tummy. Getting that gradient. Okay. I think that is all right. Just bring a little bit more back on the top of the tummy. Although it's angled pretty far away, I still wanted to get enough that it feels like it's kind of puffed out or something, like the character is kind of like taking a big deep breath in awe or something like that. So it's a little exaggerated, I suppose. And you know, it makes it a little more round, a little cuter, a little more kind of interesting to look at because there's just more shape. Alright, just... Honestly, the knees are kind of more upward facing, so they would probably actually get more light. But I don't know, it doesn't look as good if it's that intense to me. But because the planes of the knee is like more 90 degrees to the light, it's going to get more photons hitting it directly, whereas the tummy at an angle is going to have kind of like less hitting it directly. They just kind of, you know, might miss. Okay. But yeah, I think that that's probably okay. Let's look at it in grayscale. Yeah, that seems all right to me. Already I feel like, you know, it's getting more in that range that I want it to be. I definitely want to hit more light on this cloak. Just the outer edges I think would look really nice now if it had enough lightness on it. So this is the cloak here. Let's do a layer on top of that and clip the layer to it. And then let's just do a luminosity, see what happens. Actually, it needs to be layers luminosity. Okay, so let's just hit this whole thing really quick. Now this is obviously not what it's going to look like in the end. So this is what I just did. I kind of like took a very bright highlight on a luminosity layer. So all it's doing is affecting the darkness of it. It's adding the light level of this exact color. So whatever the white of that color is, it's adding it to that layer. Now, if I just kind of like take this down, I can kind of find the value that I want that to sit at. Let's say maybe somewhere around here. Sure. And then I'll erase away where the head is blocking that light. We'll use a soft eraser because I kind of want that to be a soft light source. And then where the cloak is rolling away, again, so like the folds, any of the creases could get pretty dark right in the crease itself because it's folding in on itself, you know, and then the light has a lot of difficulty like getting right into those creases, so it gets quite dark again. Not a lot of lights bouncing in and then bouncing back at us. Okay. So that's not bad for just kind of like indicating where I want the light and shadow to fall. But now I think I'm just going to kind of refine it manually, just to make it land exactly where I want it to. So the edges of the cloak kind of like standing out is important, I think, to the design of the character. Sometimes you want things to pop out, sometimes things should fall back and kind of like almost just be obscured. So like the top edge of the cloak right now is very obscured, and that's okay. I don't need the viewer to like really look at that detail, but the edge of this is telling the viewer this is where kind of the arm is pulling at the cloak. So that's kind of something important to be able to identify and see. It just helps show what's going on with this character. As well, I have very strong contrast on the sides of the face here. You know, it's quite dark because it's on such a dark kind of like everything else. It pops out nicely. There's a hard edge there. So it just kind of makes the face kind of like come out of the piece. And I think I like that. I might soften one of the edges somewhere, just so that it adds a little bit of visual interest. Let's see. So this is the face here. If I, let's say, take my smudge brush and just along kind of like maybe this edge here, I just feather it a little bit. It just kind of blends it in right here. Maybe a little bit here. And now that just ever so slightly falls back, but that also makes other hard edges more interesting, and there's more contrast between soft and hard edges, and it just kind of like adds some visual richness. There's other things that I do, not enough, but I want to do more of, that adds more of that kind of visual richness. One of the things is kind of adding just colors into things that you wouldn't necessarily actually see, but it can add a little bit of something interesting. So let's try a color layer, and if I just kind of like paint in colors and just make this like really, really, really light, so like you can barely even detect that color is there, but there's a little hint of green there. And so maybe at the edges I want to get more of this kind of purple worked in, especially in kind of like the grays, the gray fur. And I'm also going to try and kind of like make these strokes go with the actual kind of shapes. So I'll like follow the forms with these brush strokes. And it's like you can barely even detect that these are here, but you can just add just a hint of life to a piece when you kind of add in this color variation. And I don't do this very often because I usually kind of don't have enough time to fiddle with it. And I'm not saying that I do today. In fact, I really should be motoring on this, but I just kind of wanted to show some interesting techniques that people don't necessarily even know happen. But yes, just kind of tossing some random colors in there and just kind of like add some interest and richness. There's a lot of old school painters actually did this, just kind of random colors in their pieces, and you don't even kind of like see it. So yeah, that's just something I might try for this. It's easy enough to do, and when you do it kind of right, you can do it pretty quickly. So I'm not too worried about adding it in. Do I have the estimated time the Valor Rift will be out? I do not. Right now we're getting pretty close to wrapping up the content creation, the actual art assets. Now that said, this is just kind of like the cast of characters that we've kind of like mostly fleshed out. In terms of kind of like building the quest itself, it's still, you know, well into it. You know, there's a lot to kind of resolve balance wise. The HUD is still in its kind of prototype phase. We have kind of like the mock-up of it running and interactable and all that. And so, you know, we're able to internally play test it and kind of like make it more interesting, kind of like cut things, add things, and it's the kind of cutting floor stage. But because I made that prototype early on, we were able to kind of determine, okay, we're going to need this many mice in this kind of like structure, and here is kind of the core idea of the gameplay. You can play it and experience it and find out what we enjoy and what we don't like, and we've kind of made changes just based off of that. But now we're actually plugging it into the MouseHunt code, and so it's a process, and there's certainly a lot of balance that's going to have to be tuned. Plus, there is still just kind of like unknowns in the actual game design until we get more playtesting internally. So what'll happen is we're going to finish up wrapping up assets. We're going to discover we need to do more assets. That's kind of how it works. We kind of create the core set of things, and then we're like, oh, we need these items now. We need a collectible here. We need a rewarding trap or base or cheese or whatever there. You know, what are you guys going for? What do we make for that? And sometimes those are kind of determined later on when we've kind of like experienced what the area is about. We could be like, ooh, this needs this, and we add that to the list. So it's very much kind of like we're finishing up the first pass of art, but we know there's going to be a lot more to come. Like I know we need to do a cheese still. I did do the elixir the last stream, so that's on my art page. I might tune that a bit. It might not be where we want it to be when we're finally done. So there would be a cheese based off that. We definitely haven't really done any of the traps and stuff that will come out of this area, so those will be things. And then, you know, like the HUD itself is a lot. There's weeks of work left on that. So yeah, what I'm saying is not any time immediate. Though the mice are coming to an end, we certainly have a lot of kind of like exploration, design, and kind of development to do still. So yeah, not any time immediately. So turning on and off that color variant layer, you can barely see it. Maybe the blues show up a little bit better because it's on that gray in a warm area. So that punches out a bit, which is nice. But it's just a little subtle thing. What I'm thinking is I want to really punch up the oranges because I really liked kind of the orange coloring that's happening in the initial kind of like pass on the character. And so I think I'll just kind of bring it out in the edges. And I also don't necessarily do this enough. There's some interesting kind of like properties that you can get with fur. I don't always kind of render the characters with fur so much. You know, it's sometimes it's just kind of like they just have a coloration on them. But because fur is like a deep texture, where there's like, you know, strands of hairs, the light actually kind of like passes down and carries on a lot further than if it was just a solid surface. So just kind of have the light come down and bring out the orange. And I don't know if that's too much. Let's see with it before and after. I might just kind of soften it a little bit there. Another thing is, and I usually don't do this, but a lot of furs can actually have kind of different colors throughout. So like the very in like closest to the root might be like white, and then there might be like a band of brown or orange, and then the tip of it kind of goes dark to like, you know, a deep chestnut brown or something like that. And depending on how the fur is kind of like draped, you can actually see those different colors in patches. Not patches, but like the where like the fur parts, you might see more of the inside colors, so the oranges and the whites might kind of show up. Um, and then like at the edges of things, you would see mostly just the tips, because if you're like looking at kind of like let's say a brush or something like that, if you're looking at it where the bristles are pointed directly at you, you can see down into the bristles and kind of see all the way through and see all the range because you're looking at the whole bristle. But if you tilt it on its side and all the bristles are just blocking each other, you only see the tips on at least the outside of it, because they're all just kind of blocking being able to view on the inside. So the edges of things, where things are kind of like turned away from you, you might just kind of get more of those dark browns if that's kind of the outer color. But then when the surface is kind of turned towards you and the bristles are actually like coming out at you, you might see down inside that texture and get more of those colors. So we're not using that technique here. It's just kind of like an interesting thing to think about when you're kind of like painting such details. There's just always a lot going on. You can essentially always overthink art if you want to. That can be a big issue. Because like, I mean, honestly, the way that I like to think about it, and it's probably detrimental, is to actually think in terms of physics and photons and, you know, what is the actual kind of the light ray doing, and it can get pretty intense. Like even when you get into kind of almost like special effects, not necessarily special effects, but like smoke and fire and kind of those kinds of elements. Like you almost need to think in the quantum kind of realm to understand why things look the way they do, and it can get pretty crazy. Yeah, we've come a long way from the original brown mouse, haven't we? It's good. It's good. That's what, you know, working on mice for over a decade will do. You learn how to make them more interesting to paint. Yeah. Actually, I was working on fire yesterday. Let me save this, and I actually want to pull it up. It's a bit of a spoiler, but you know what? It's cool. Or at least I think it's cool because I had fun with it. It actually came together pretty quick. But normally I do fire as a very stylized kind of symbol. Let me show you. And this is how most people actually like draw fire, because it's kind of like, I don't know, it's the illustration version of fire, where you have kind of like your kind of, you know, outer shape, right? Just kind of clean that edge a little bit. And I've honestly been doing it this way for years, and there's nothing wrong with it, because it looks great, and it's worked all this time, right? And then you kind of like start to kind of trend towards yellow, right? Maybe I'll get some of that orange up in there, maybe a little bit is broken off here, and you'll get like kind of sparks and stuff coming off of it, let's say, and then trend even more towards the yellow. you know, and this looks, that looks like fire. Not bad. And we might even go all the way to white to kind of like overexpose and just kind of make it super bright, right? And maybe I'll leave a little bit of this yellow on the edge so the overexposure kind of looks more appropriate. And heck, if we want to get super fancy, we could even do one of my favorite tricks where essentially we add in just a smidge of the complementary color just to make it look like you're burning your retinas looking at it, right? Because I'm kind of creating this burn-in effect. This might be a bit too dark for the effect. This is a fun little technique. Just kind of painting in the opposite color to make it feel like you kind of like overloaded your eyes, essentially. So that's kind of like how I did fire for a long time, and it's pretty effective, I would say. So let's see what I kind of like experimented with yesterday. And so I was essentially thinking more about kind of like how heat, like hot air expands and rises, and cool air is more kind of like dense and you know, gets pulled down with gravity. And then when you know you have fire, it's obviously a very intense version of that. So you get these kind of columns of air, kind of slipping past each other and mixing. And is this it? It's going to open. But what you actually end up getting is the fire, because you have convection currents,